Ladies and gentlemen, here is Bob Dylan.
One might assume that the two legendary figures of American music, the voice and the poet, would have crossed paths. You'd expect a photograph, a handshake, or a shared stage. But the truth is more complicated. A tangled web of hero worship, a cryptic song, and a 50-year-old mystery. For decades, fans have pointed to one of Bob Dylan's songs as a secret diary entry detailing his meeting with Elvis Presley. But when Dylan finally spoke, the answer was a flat-out denial that only deepened the intrigue, painting a picture not of a colleague, but of a man desperately protecting an idol. Let's untangle the 50-year-old mystery of the song Bob Dylan wrote about Elvis, why he flatly denied ever meeting him, and the shocking truth. The King and the Courtier. To understand the mystery, you have to understand the power dynamic. In Bob Dylan's mind, he and Elvis were never peers. One was the king, the other was a lifelong courtier. For a young Robert Zimmerman in Minnesota, Elvis wasn't just a singer, he was an emancipator. Hearing that voice on the radio was a big bang event that created a new world of possibilities and provided an escape route from a conventional life. This wasn't just teenage fandom, it was the foundational event of his artistic life, and he never forgot it. Even at the absolute pinnacle of his own fame, after he had rewritten the rules of music and become the voice of a generation, Dylan's reverence for the king remained absolute. For him, the ultimate validation didn't come from critics or stadium-sized crowds, but from one man who started it all. In a 1969 interview, long after he had become a global icon himself, Dylan was asked about the highlight of his career. Quote, "Elvis Presley recorded a song of mine. That's the one recording I treasure the most. It was called Tomorrow is a Long Time. I wrote it but never recorded it." This quiet, creative dialogue was more real than most fans knew. Elvis, for his part, was listening. During his 1960s movie era and his 1970s comeback, Presley had become, quote, disenchanted with his own career and wanted to dig deeper into the folk and blues music that Dylan now defined. He found that artistic legitimacy in Dylan's catalog. He recorded Tomorrow is a Long Time for the Spin Out soundtrack after hearing a cover by folk singer Odetta. He sang Don't Think Twice, It's All Right, and a bare-bones version of I Shall Be Released during his live shows. He even sang Blowin' in the Wind around a piano with his buddies at home. Dylan had the king's approval, a connection most artists would kill for. So in 1970, when Dylan released a new album, fans and insiders spotted a song that seemed to describe, in cryptic detail, the one thing Dylan wanted most, a face-to-face meeting. Went to See the Gypsy. The song was Went to See the Gypsy from the 1970 album New Morning. On the surface, it's a typical Dylan narrative, full of obscure characters and dreamlike imagery. But almost immediately, a rumor began to circulate, one that came from the room where it happened. The story originates from Ron Cornelius, the guitarist who played on the album. Cornelius reported that he had personally asked Bob Dylan what Went to See the Gypsy was about, and Dylan replied it was about going to see Elvis in Las Vegas. Once that key was turned, the song unlocked itself, revealing a checklist of uncanny, specific details. The lyrics describe the narrator staying in a big hotel. At the time, Elvis was in his legendary residency at the International Hotel, the biggest in Vegas. The narrator is led to the gypsy's room. Quote, "His room was dark and crowded, lights were low and dim." This was a perfect description of Elvis's private penthouse, famously kept dark and always filled with his Memphis Mafia entourage. The timeline was also perfect. Elvis's Vegas comeback began in 1969, and New Morning was released in 1970. But the quote-unquote smoking gun was a line shouted by a pretty dancing girl in the lobby. Go on back to see the gypsy. He did it in Las Vegas, and he can do it here. The connection seemed undeniable. But the song is also deeply strange. If it's about meeting Elvis, it's a story of a profound anticlimax. The entire conversation between the two most important figures in American music is summarized in one hollow, awkward exchange. "How are you?" he said to me. I said it back to him. The narrator then leaves to make a phone call, and when he returns, the gypsy's door was wide open, but the gypsy was gone. The song doesn't end in the big hotel. It ends with a symbolic retreat as the narrator watches the sun come rising from that little Minnesota town. It's a song about an empty encounter, a missed connection, and a return to one's own roots. This wasn't a song about a star. It was a song about the man who changed Dylan's life. He described that initial impact with an almost spiritual fervor. Quote, "When I first heard Elvis Presley's voice, I just knew I wasn't going to work for anybody and nobody was going to be my boss. Hearing him for the first time was like busting out of jail." The song felt like a coded confession. It captured the awe, the mystery, even the disappointment of meeting a hero. For decades, this was the accepted story. And then in 2009, Bob Dylan blew the entire theory to pieces. The Great Contradiction. In a candid 2009 interview with Rolling Stone, Dylan was asked about the Gypsy theory. His answer was a stunning and direct contradiction of everything fans believed. He stated bluntly he had never met Elvis because he didn't want to meet him. This wasn't just a simple denial, it was a manifesto. He went on to explain, in deeply personal terms, why he had actively avoided his hero. He confirmed he had opportunities, saying that 2 or 3 times they were in Hollywood, Elvis had sent some members of the Memphis Mafia to bring them up to meet him, but none of them went. The reason, he explained, was that he was terrified of what he'd find. He was afraid of meeting the 1960s movie-era Elvis, the one, quote, just cranking him out and knocking him off. He was afraid to see the man who had set him free ridiculed or fading. To meet the mortal, diminished man would be to risk destroying the powerful, mythical idea that had formed the basis of his own artistic life. It was an act not of snobbery, but of profound vulnerability and self-preservation. His explanation was one of the most poignant and vulnerable statements he'd made about another artist. He wasn't snubbing his hero, he was protecting his own soul. Quote, "I don't know if I would have wanted to see Elvis like that. I wanted to see the powerful, mystical Elvis that had crash-landed from a burning star onto American soil, the Elvis that was bursting with life. That's the Elvis that inspired us. And that Elvis was gone, had left the building." This profound emotional statement seemed to settle the matter. The Ron Cornelius story was a misunderstanding or a private joke. Went to See the Gypsy was just a fable, a work of fiction. In 2017, though, Dylan dropped one more bombshell. The 1972 no-show. For decades, a different rumor had circulated about an event in '72. The story went that Bob Dylan and George Harrison attended an Elvis Presley concert together at Madison Square Garden. Afterwards, a historic recording session was supposedly planned for the 3 of them. But, as the old legend claimed, Elvis, the tragic, isolated, unreliable star, failed to turn up. In 2017, during a rare Q&A with Bill Flanagan, Dylan was asked about a 1972 incident. The interviewer mentioned an old rumor saying he had heard Dylan and George Harrison were supposed to record with Elvis. Dylan responded, 45 years later, rewriting history, saying Elvis did show up, but it was they who didn't. Elvis was there, the king showed up, ready to play and collaborate with the 2 men who represented the new guard. And Bob Dylan was a no-show. He and Harrison bailed. His 2009 Rolling Stone quote wasn't just philosophy, it was the confession of a man who had actively fled from the one meaning he supposedly cherished. So, what is Went to See the Gypsy? It's the song Bob Dylan wrote because he never met Elvis. It's a fable, a dream sequence, an imagined what-if that explores the very anticlimactic, sad meeting he was so terrified of. The song, the 2009 denial, and the 1972 no-show are all one continuous, tragic story. He had to avoid the man to save the myth. And when Elvis died in 1977, Dylan's reaction proved his strategy worked. He didn't mourn a colleague, he mourned the burning star he had so carefully preserved. Now it's time to hear from you. What was most surprising about this story? Let us know in the comments section below.